Climate change is expected to reduce the amount of rainfall. This is going to result in increasing scarcity. Climate change is also expected to increase the frequency and intensity of drought events in many areas worldwide. The traditional reaction against these challenges has been the use of supply and command and control instruments. With supply instruments, we refer to engineering solutions in which, through which policymakers try to increase the supply base. For example, the construction of reservoirs, the construction of new canals, the construction of other diversion infrastructures such as interbasin transfers, for example. This supply or this engineering solution has been a huge success thus far in many areas. In some areas they are still a success, they are still being used and they can address these problems. But in some areas in which the river basin is already closed, the supply base is inelastic. So basically it's impossible to increase the amount of water resources available through this type of engineering solutions. The other alternative are command and control policies. Command and control policies basically specify a target that has to be attained by water users. It's based on regulations, basically. So what these regulations specify is, for example, this farmer cannot use more than X cubic meters this year, in which we are suffering a drought, for example. Command and control instruments are a useful tool, certainly. The problem that they have is that they don't specify any incentive. Without any incentive, it's unlikely that they are able to meet the targets set by environmental regulations. What we economists propose is the use of economic instruments. Economic instruments are not intended to be used alone. They are complementary to engineering and command and control solutions, obviously. And they include incentives in the recipe. When you include incentives, what you are trying to do is driving the behavior of the agent in such a way that it complies with the environmental targets that you have defined. An economic instrument that is widely used in the European context is water charges. Water charges fit very well into the European acquis because they rely on the polluter pays principle, according to which you have to charge the person who is responsible for the environmental pollution or environmental deterioration, in this case through scarcity and droughts. The problem with water charges is that they face large transaction costs. It's very difficult to deal with water users and make them comply. It's very difficult to implement the policy. It's very difficult to make institutions change and develop the arrangements necessary to come up with this type of solution. There are also other economic instruments that have been used in different places worldwide. This is the case of water markets, which are very common in the semi-arid states of Western USA, and in Australia as well, where they have been a success thus far to reallocate water to its more efficient uses. Water buyback is a purchase tender in which the public institution or a group of individuals create a pool of resources that is used to recover water for the environment, water that was previously used for private uses. Water buyback has the potential of unblocking transition because they are giving a compensation to the users, and therefore it's more likely that they will accept to stop using the resources that they have been allotted. The problem with this approach in the European context is that it doesn't fit very well into the polluter pays principle. But if you take a look at the EU water realpolitik, you will realize that these approaches are already common in countries like Spain. In Spain, the water purchase tenders have been used to recover water in the Guadiana, in the Segura and in the Júcar, which are three basins in a situation of absolute scarcity, in which the resources that are withdrawn from the river already exceed the renewable resources. And they have been used in a successful way, at least in two of these three cases. In other countries like Australia and the United States, water buyback has been also a successful approach. The problem with water buyback is that it's very expensive. Meaning you want to recover all these resources buying the water to the users, which by the way are not the proprietors of these resources. They only have the right to use the water. Then you will need to come up with a very large budget. In the current situation of budgetary constraints, this is unlikely to happen. What economists try to do in the end is to find a cost-effective solution. With a cost-effective solution, we refer to a solution that accounts both the abatement costs, i.e. the cost of fulfilling the environmental targets of the Water Framework Directive or the corresponding regulation, environmental regulation, and a solution that also takes into account the transaction costs, i.e. the cost of changing and adapting institutions to the new reality. For example, changing institutions in such a way that they are able of implementing water charges. If you take into account these two costs in your policy design, then you're able to come up with a strategy that is cost effective. However, it's important to take into account that there are also some ethical issues going on. For example, the ruling of the European Court of Justice suggests that the polluter pays principle is becoming more a rule than a principle. Therefore, if we want to implement solutions that may be cost-effective, potentially, such as water buyback, we also need to take into account the societal preferences.